welcome to Cover Story. Well, today we are talking to Dr. Monica Mahajan. She is Director Internal Medicine at the Max Healthcare Hospital. But today we're not going to be just talking to her about COVID and about healthcare, but also about a book that she's written. Congratulations, Monica. I have the book with me. It's The Fearless Traveler. She's written a book on travel. And if you're wondering why a doctor is writing a book on travel, well, two reasons. One, of course, is that she loves to travel. She and her husband love to go off the beaten path. But also, secondly, this book, what it does is it tells you it's got some very handy trips for the traveler. We all take that toilet kit with us when we go. We also have a sort of a medicine kit. But what all to take? What are the essentials, especially in COVID times? What should one take? And each section of the book actually has tips for various travel, whether it's for, if you're feeling seasick, or if you're a foreigner in Delhi and you have the Delhi belly, or if you're a elderly person looking to travel, or if you're traveling in COVID times, or if you're, even if you're with kids on a roller coaster ride. I think she's thought of every kind of travel. So welcome, Monica. And I really enjoyed reading this book. I must tell you, I picked it up with some apprehension, wondering, this is going to be all about just trips and tourists. But the medical tips, I think, were fantastic. And they really helped all of us. So thank you for this book. And so have you done any traveling post-COVID?
Yes, I have started to travel, and I'm so glad finally I'm talking to you about something which is not COVID. Last 2 years, all you've been talking to me about is COVID, and I'm really looking forward to doing something other than that today.
Where did you go?
So we went to an offbeat place called Hartola, which is out in the hills. So the idea was that post-COVID, we observe all the precautions, but yet we are outdoors and doing some mountaineering and some outdoor activities. So in terms of Tijara and then in terms of Hartola and offbeat places, but with taking adequate precautions that we were not exposing ourselves too much.
In fact, I'm going to begin with that. I'm sorry, but I'm going to drag you right back to COVID because it's.
Okay, that's fine.
But things are opening up. There is a sort of pause after that disastrous second wave. So, what are the tips that you would give for the COVID traveler? What are the precautions apart from the vaccinations, of course?
So I think the positive story in India is that the vaccine acceptance is very good compared to some of the Western countries where there is a lot of vaccine hesitancy. So we are doing quite okay, even though we have a very, very large population to cater. But I would say that we've still not won the battle. We haven't reached the finishing line as far as this marathon race is concerned. And those last few meters are still to be run. So we still have to be cautious. It's the festival season. The cases during the winters as such tend to rise. So I think it's important that you don't let your guard down. You can go and enjoy the festivities. You can go into a smaller group, which is called as a bubble group concept. But in terms of larger gatherings, I would be still a little wary of the situation as to how it develops in the winters and post the festivities.
You've given some tips in the book also, for instance, when you're seating, try and sit outdoors, etc. So, if you can just go through some of these tips for our viewers.
Okay. So what we've discussed is basically in terms of the outdoor seating is much safer than indoor restaurants. Again, traveling to smaller resorts and smaller places is good. You can go to a bigger property or a bigger hotel setting, provided that they are taking adequate precautions. So I've visited both sort of properties, and I've seen places where they are following the norms and the rules right to the T in terms of the waiters wearing masks, as well as in terms of maintaining the distances between the guests. And there are other places where the precautions are just thrown out of the window. So you will have to choose your destination properly. See that if the place requires you to carry a COVID PCR certificate before you enter into the state, then please do follow that. If you have any sort of symptoms, then don't expose the rest of the group. If you're traveling as a group, make sure that everybody in the group is healthy, because otherwise it spoils the group dynamics. And we've had groups of people coming down with COVID together. So it's really that you have to be respecting the rest of the group and not traveling if you have any sort of symptoms happening. Again, in terms of preferring a private transport rather than a public transport is a good idea. So your own car makes better sense. If you're traveling by international flights, then of course it is mandatory still in terms of getting the required COVID PCR and uploading that certificate on the website. So most of the people are still taking the precautions, but a smaller group, private transport rather than a public transport, and a place where all the precautions are the norm is a much better option as far as travel is concerned. Again, small little trips with your own family, even little cycling expeditions are good enough where you are not really in a crowded environment. You go out and eat, but eat outdoors is better rather than sitting indoors and eating.
A lot of people had lung problems post COVID. So would you then recommend a mountain air and a cycling trip rather than, a beach perhaps? No.
Any form of exercise is going to only expand the lungs. So I'm not really talking of going to Mount Everest after COVID. I'm talking of going to the pure, clean mountain air. And if at all it is only going to benefit your lungs, it's really not going to cause any sort of a problem. So I would say a mountain is still a good option post COVID because you will tend to deep breathe. You will tend to breathe a much cleaner, unpolluted air. So it's a good option to go to.
Higher altitudes, are they recommended in terms of, your lungs capacity to handle those?
So high altitude in an Indian setting would be talking of places like Ladakh and similar kind of destinations. So that anyways, you have to see as to what your breathing capacity is. So it's not necessary that everybody who will travel to high altitude will get high altitude sickness. There are certain risk factors that are there. But most people who've had mild to moderate COVID are now post 3 months of the second wave. It is safe enough to travel. It's not a problem.
Last question on COVID travel is they're also recommending, I believe, you get these do-it-yourself test kits at home. How safe are they? How would you recommend those?
So for people who need to be testing frequently, especially the students in the Western world and in America, most of them are only doing the self-test kits. The student tests and drops it into the drop box and the result comes on his phone. That is how the Western world is moving forward. So self-help kits are fairly okay for people who need repetitive testing. But having said that, the sensitivity and specificity of a self-help kit may not be that great, especially when you're talking of mutant viruses. Again, if you're traveling to certain destinations, they will not recognize a self-test kit as a standard. They will ask you for an RT-PCR to be done. So just for a screening purpose, for your own comfort, you can do a self-testing in India, but for practical purposes and for travel purposes, an RT-PCR would make much better sense.
I'm asking is because we almost Diwali is upon us, and a lot of people are issuing invites saying, do your self-help test kit and then come to the party.
I haven't received an invitation of that sort as yet. I have Diwali invitations, but nobody's asked me to test and come. So I hope. Yeah.
Okay, now, various types of travel, and let me talk to the one that I suffer the most. First of all, what are the most must have on your travel kit, your medical kit, that every traveler should take? Some medicines that you recommend, or what are the illnesses that you should look for?
Okay, so let's divide a travel kit into a very, very simplified version. One is things that need to be part of every kit, which would include basic things like a sunscreen, a mosquito repellent, a thermometer, some band-aids, a crepe bandage maybe, and those kind of items which are generic items which every kit should have. And in the COVID times also in terms of carrying an N95 or a face mask may make better sense. Then there are specific medications that need to be part of a first aid kit because you are in remote areas, you would want to treat your delhi belly, or you would want to treat your skin allergies and skin conditions, a cough, cold, a diarrhea, or a constipation. So the basic first aid medication should include something for nausea, vomiting, motion sickness, diarrhea, basic fever medication. And you have to have the medication after checking with your doctor that these medicines are safe for you, especially if you are an elderly person or especially for a small child. The third part of a medical kit would be your specific medicines that you are on. And I always say that 2 rules: if you're traveling for 3 weeks, carry at least 4 weeks of medicines, because medicines tend to get lost, medicines tend to get misplaced, or you may tend to overstay with your children in America and run out of medicine suddenly. So it's always wiser to carry some extra medicines with you. And the last part of a first aid kit should be an emergency card, which mentions your name, it mentions your diagnosis, your current medicines, who is your caregiver, contact number for an emergency contact, any sort of allergies that you have, and if you have a medical insurance, then the name of the insurance provider. So as long as you have these 4 components, your own medicines, the emergency medicines, the stuff in terms of repellents and sunscreens, and an emergency card, you are quite well equipped as far as a first aid kit is concerned. And of course, if you are using any kind of special equipments or special things, for example, you carry your contact lenses, but if you forget to carry the solution for a contact lens, you are heading for trouble. Or if you have a hearing aid and you run out of batteries, you need extra batteries. So whatever extra things you are using as part of your day-to-day life, you need to make sure that you have the solutions and the batteries with you.
What I found very interesting is, you said sunscreen and mosquito repellent, but you also tell us that you should use one before the other, and the rationale for that, if you can explain that.
Okay, so a lot of places you will have to use both. So if you're layering one on top of the other, the mosquito repellent has to be the first layer, the sunscreen has to be on top, because if you use the sunscreen below and then the mosquito repellent on top, it may not really work very well. So you need a sunscreen with an SPF of at least 30. That's the sun protection factor. You need to apply it at least 30 minutes before you step outdoors. And then again, in terms of using sunscreens which are water resistant, especially if you're going for a swim or any kind of water activities. Mosquito repellents per se would be safe for all age groups, whether it is in terms of pregnant women or small babies or any age group for that matter. But again, in terms of mosquito repellents, while you're applying it on the face, make sure that you don't end up spraying it inside your eyes and your nose. So put it on your hand and then dab it on your face rather than directly ending up putting it inside your eyes, because that really irritates. You don't need to use a mosquito repellent on the covered areas of the body. It is only on the exposed areas of the body that you would need to use the repellent. And some of the mosquitoes are actually day-biting mosquitoes. So especially in the dengue season now, you need to understand that dengue is a day-biting mosquito. So you need to be using the repellents more in the daytime rather than in the nighttime. Any destination which has a lot of mosquitoes, you would prefer to have a netting or a mosquito repellent spray on the nets which are being used around the bed. But common sense says that if you are going to an area which has a lot of dengue or malaria outbreaks happening, or for women who are planning pregnancy or pregnant Zika outbreak happening, you have to preferably look at safer options for a pregnant or a planning pregnancy woman.
Also, tips for traveling to the hillside, and something that I suffer from, motion sickness. And actually, you explained why people suffer from motion sickness also in your book, which I found very interesting. So I'm going to ask you to share that with our viewers, but after a very quick break. So stay with us. What are your tips? Let's talk about motion sickness, since I have a vested interest in asking you that. Why do some people? You said it could be hereditary, which is one, but otherwise also, just explain the science behind motion sickness and what kind of medicines should one take to try and prevent it?
Okay, so what we need to understand is that our body's balancing system is interconnected in terms of the signals that our brain receives from input from the eyes and input from the ears. So our ears have some balancing canals which are filled with fluid. So whenever there is a mismatch in the brain in terms of the signals it is getting, the brain gets confused and we get motion sickness. For example, if you are in a cruise or if you're going on a hilly terrain, the objects in the cruise are moving at the speed of the ship. But for you, when you look at it, you perceive that the object is stationary. So there's a mismatch in the cues that are coming to you to the brain from the eyes and the ears. So the balancing fluid in the ears goes for a toss and it starts generating waves. And those waves cause a feeling of motion sickness, a kind of dizziness, and it keeps happening in terms of a spinning feeling of the head. So it's basically the confusion that is created because of the wrong perceived cues by the brain from the various end organs which are for the balance of the body. So there are very simple tips for motion sickness. One is in terms of say if you're on the sea or in the ship, you try and look at distant objects, and the same applies for traveling by car when you're traveling, that you don't do any kind of a near activity, whether it is in terms of texting or in terms of reading or any kind of needlework, because that will create more confusion in the mind and you'll have more motion sickness. So try and look at a distant object in the horizon try and not focus on close objects or near objects or do any sort of a reading. You can open the window and enjoy the cold breeze around you, or on the ship deck, you can enjoy the cold breeze. Try and take a short nap. And of course, then there are medicines which are there in terms of motion sickness. So people who are more prone to motion sickness can mention it to their doctor, and they can be given prophylactic medication before they go on a trip so that they don't suffer motion sickness. And the interesting part about motion sickness is that if you're on one sort of a conveyance, it is not necessary that you'll get motion sickness on all sorts of modes of travel. So somebody who gets motion sickness in a car is not bound to get motion sickness in a cruise, and vice versa. So it's women who are more prone to motion sickness, people who have migraine are more prone to motion sickness, and somehow it also tends to run in the family. And people who are more anxiety prone are more prone to motion sickness. So I would say just divert your mind, close your eyes, listen to some music rather than reading a book, and you'll find yourself much better as far as finding your sea legs is concerned.
Okay, that is something to keep in mind. And also, now that air travel has opened up, you also have tips on jet lag. If you can share those with us, because now that hopefully we are going to be doing a bit of international travel once again.
Yeah. So jet lag again is in terms of crossing the different time zones. So depending on whether you're traveling eastwards or whether you're traveling westwards, or losing hours and gaining hours, that is how jet lag would again be sending cues to the brain, because we have an organ in the brain which produces something called as melatonin. Now, melatonin is responsible for our sleep-awake cycle, and melatonin is dependent on light and darkness. So when there is darkness around us, the brain produces melatonin, and that puts us off to a sound sleep. So somehow when you are in an area where the day and the night cycle gets disrupted, the melatonin production goes down and you start to get jet lagged. And we've seen people sitting in conferences and just dozing off in the middle of a conference because they are so jet lagged that they can't focus on what's happening on the podium. So the best way is in terms of trying to set your clock to the destination time when you're in the flight. Try and catch a nap if you're losing hours as far as travel is concerned. And if you have to go and attend an important meeting, it is always better to land one day in advance rather than to just land and go in the middle of an important meeting or a deal that you're trying to clinch. Again, things like coffee may help. In terms of melatonin, comes as a tablet that may help in terms of regulating the sleep cycle. But try and change your sleep timings a few days prior to travel, so you'll be better adapted as far as jet lag is concerned.
Also, travel for the elderly, you're saying that age should not be a preventive and keep you from undertaking that journey. But there are a few helpful tips that help you make your journey easier. So if you could share those with the viewers.
So I say that travel is for all age groups. It's not really restricted to the younger people. And why should the people in the golden years not be enjoying travel? In fact, that's the best time to travel, because you're done with your family responsibilities. And as a couple or as a human being, you have now a chance to explore the whole world. So it's, as long as you're taking adequate precautions and you're well equipped in terms of your medical backup. If you've taken a travel insurance, make sure that you're getting a travel insurance which is covering your pre-existing diseases, as well as in terms of, if needed, a medical evacuation. Look at trips which are not very hectic. Don't try and squeeze in too many activities into one trip. Try and enjoy the destination as much as possible. And then there may be specific needs if you are a traveler with underlying medical conditions. For example, if you're diabetic, then you need to be carrying insulin in a cool pack. You need to have sufficient glucometer strips and a glucometer with you. Follow some sick day rules if you are sick during a travel, or if you are exerting too much, maybe you need to cut down your amount of diabetes medicine if you're doing too much of physical activity. Whereas if you're taking too many drinks at the bar, or you're taking too much of carbs when you're traveling as a diabetic, you may need to actually take a few more units of the insulin if you are on that. Similarly, a person with Parkinsonism, if he needs to travel, he needs to remember that his activities are a little slower than the rest of the people in the group. So maybe it makes sense to start dressing up a little early and moving out a little early. If he uses a backpack, it leaves his hands free to do all the activities, so it gives him more flexibility. Travelers who are elderly should be wearing a comfortable pair of sports shoes while walking. Again, select a seat which is close to the bathrooms and an aisle seat rather than a window seat, because that's convenient. And again, in terms of the elderly, a lot of times they have problems in terms of incontinence. The bladder tends to be a little leaky. So again, an aisle seat next to the bathroom makes sense. Don't take too much of caffeinated drinks, because that will irritate the bladder and you'll keep wanting to go and go to the loo. You can safely use absorbent diapers if you have a long journey to undertake. And in terms of eating well and hydrating yourself well, that the urine is not too concentrated. So practically every age group, every sort of elderly traveler can travel. There are people who have been on wheelchairs and they've explored the whole world. There are people who have hearing disabilities and they are exploring. Blind people are part of a group which is an inclusive group, where the normal ability people and people with disabilities are traveling together. So it's called as accessible travel. So I would say that practically there's nobody on earth who's unfit for travel. Everybody is fit to travel. It's just that you need to tweak your travel plans in such a way that you're doing it as per your capacity.
I recall something very interesting. You wrote a list of famous people who had motion sickness, and there's, I think Christopher Columbus is there, and so is Napoleon's army. So world would have been a different place if they'd stayed at home.
You can add your name to that if you want.
I will definitely, yes, part of that. But now I know what to do. Also, in terms of, you discussed a bit about students, who need to travel in terms of vaccination and all. But what about the backpack traveler? That's also, young kids who are really going out, and they don't have, I don't think they'll have much access. They won't have probably not even taken their insurance out in terms of medical. So should everybody, like for instance, should you always carry one antibiotic, one antihistamine, one, is there some genre of medicines that you must always have for those who are out in the wild?
Yeah, so the book actually gives you quite a comprehensive list of medicines that you carry if you're out in the wilderness. And it does not only talk of the medicines, it also talks of a flashlight and a lighter, and in terms of a tweezer and a scissors and a duct tape, things which you would need if you're out in the wild and with no help.
Why would you need a tweezer apart from wanting to look good?
Okay, so if you have tick bites, you want to pull out the tick. You can't do it with your hand. You would need a tweezer. If you have a leech stinging on and clinging onto your skin, you need a tweezer to pull it out. So you
pour salt on the leech, or you?
Yeah, you can pour salt. You can pour vinegar. In case in terms of a jellyfish sting, you would need vinegar, and you would need seawater to pour on it. So different stings, different bites, you need different stuff.
There in the book, bee stings also, I remember now.
Definitely, it is there. It is there. So backpackers are a very exciting group of travelers, in the sense that they are traveling either solo or as a group, and they are going as per their pace and their whims and fancies. So a lot of them would be pitching tents outside, or would be just doing the basic Airbnb kind of facilities or summer camps. But the excitement and the zing that is there in terms of backpacking, because you are just moving at your own pace and you're discovering so many uncharted territories around you, that I say that the best form of travel is actually backpacking. You leave that level of uncertainty around you so that you have that excitement factor as to what you're going to see next. It's like going on a safari. You are trying to see the tiger at every step. You may not see the tiger, you may see the tiger. Similarly with backpacking, you may suddenly come on an undiscovered route, or you may find suddenly a small lake that you were not even aware of. So backpacking is kind of the best form of traveling that you can do, and you can economize as long as you're traveling sensibly and you have facilities in terms of making sure that you have some shelter, you have some food, and you have medical aid. I think you can go ahead and do that. You don't need a big budget for it.
On that note, thank you so much for all these tips, and I totally enjoy reading your book, which I do recommend for the traveler, any kind of traveler. There's something for everybody in that book. But thank you so much, and hope to talk to you again on topics other than COVID. I enjoyed this chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure talking to you every time. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.